Hi everyone. This series of videos will take you through lesson 8I in the packet, which is going to cover percent multipliers. I do want to make the disclaimer that before we start, you'll definitely need to have a calculator of some sort to be able to do most of the problems in this lesson. So you might want to prepare that by making sure that you pause this video, get a calculator, and make sure that it can do some basic calculations. It doesn't have to be a fancy graphing calculator unless you already own one. It can probably be whatever calculator you have on your phone, or even just a basic scientific calculator. But you'll definitely need to make sure you have one, because some of the calculations we're going to do involve decimals and multiplication, and I think that sort of thing is easier if you don't have to do it all by hand. In any case, today we're going to deal with problems that have multipliers that grow by a certain percentage. Percentages are one of those things that many of us learn in middle school or maybe in Algebra 1, but we don't necessarily use them a lot in Algebra 2. So I'll take a quick moment just to remind you of how to find percentages of something in case this is something that you know how to do, just need a refresher, or if you've totally forgotten and need to actually remember. So just to kind of remind ourselves of what percentage problems can sound like, percentage problems often sound like things like, for example, if you have out shopping an opportunity to spend, let's say, $50 on a pair of jeans, but the store is offering a 20% off deal. If the question at hand is, how do you figure out how much the jeans cost? There are really two calculations that you need to do. The first thing you need to do is find 20% of $50. And that, to me, translates really literally. I'm going to say that just so that way if you don't have a way of doing percentages, you can adapt this method, because I think it kind of helps. I like to literally translate this as follows. 20% is 0.20. We always convert percentages to decimals. That's just a good practice, and you'll see why as we go through this lesson. But just something to keep in mind, we always convert percentages to decimals. Of means multiply, and $50 is, of course, $50. So to find 20% of $50, we do 0.20, move the decimal 2 places to the left to convert it to a decimal. So 0.20 times 50. 0.20 times 50, if you want to just use a calculator to do that, is going to be 10. And that's what tells us the amount that we're going to get as a discount. That 20% off really translates to saying $10 off. So now that I know I'm getting $10 off, I can take what I started with, $50, minus the $10 discount that I'm going to get, and that tells me the new and improved price of the item I'm trying to buy. So generally speaking, when you need to find a percentage of something, of means multiply. That's kind of the biggest, most important thing that you'll need to know. Of means multiply. And that also means that when you're multiplying, you need to multiply two compatible things. 20% is a percentage, but 50 is not, which is why we had to change 20% to a decimal. That way the decimal number was more compatible with the real number 50, and we were multiplying like terms that actually belong together. Now that was just a quick little tutorial to remind you of how percentages work, because once you know how percentages work, question number 1 will hopefully make a little bit more sense. Question number 1 is about a lottery. And the lottery begins on the first Monday of the month with an initial jackpot of $1,000. We know that initial values are kind of important, so I'm going to circle that number just as a reminder. I'll probably need it. It says every day the jackpot increases by 10%. So in theory, if I want to figure out the value of the jackpot the following day, or Tuesday, I'll need to figure out, first of all, what 10% of 1,000 is, so I know exactly how many dollars it's increasing by. And then I'll need to add that value to the jackpot so I can see what the new jackpot for Tuesday will be. So again, this is kind of like a two-step process. The first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to find 10% of $1,000. And just like we did in the example, that means we can translate this quite literally into an expression we can deal with. 10% means move the decimal 2 places to the left. The decimal is currently after the 0, so 1, 2 makes my decimal 0.10. Of means multiply 1,000. Now I have compatible terms, so I can definitely do that. 0.10 times 1,000 is going to be 100. Now that's not my answer, and that doesn't really make sense. If the jackpot was $1,000 and it's growing by 10%, it doesn't make sense that $100 would be the jackpot the next day. That's what reminds us there's technically a second step. We need to add that value to the $1,000 that's already existed. That's because, remember, this represents how much the jackpot grew. So the jackpot grew overnight by $100. So now I have the initial jackpot of 1,000 plus 100 more, and that gives me a new jackpot of 1,100. So it's kind of a two-step process. Figure out what 10% of the current jackpot is, and then add that value to the current jackpot to figure out what the next jackpot will be. The reason I wanted you to see that example is because question letter B is very similar. So between now and the time you start the next video, try question letter B, because that's going to ask you to find Wednesday's jackpot. Wednesday's jackpot would be similar. You'd find 10% of whatever you had on Tuesday, and then that adds to Tuesday's jackpot, and that becomes Wednesday. If you had to keep going and going and going and going, you could actually go even further by simply repeating that process over and over. You want to find Thursday? Well, find 10% of Wednesday and add it in. You want to find Friday? Then find 10% of Thursday and add it in. In fact, now that I hear myself say these things, I'm going to revise my initial instructions. I originally had you try letter B. I'm going to actually have you go all the way through letter D between now and the time you start the next video. Keep repeatedly finding these next jackpots over and over and over and over again so that you can get all the way through the first week worth of lottery tickets. So, in other words, the first week's worth of jackpots ends in Sunday's space in this table in letter D. So try to answer all the questions from A through D, and hopefully you'll start to kind of see that it gets repetitive, which is a good thing. Once you get that repetitive nature, then we'll look at some patterns that you can use for the remainder of the questions.